Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our weekly show about how technology is changing the creative industries. Today on the program, how AI will change fashion. We are revisiting the latest edition of Virtual Creativity Live, recorded in front of a live audience at the Lynk Co showroom in Stockholm. In this episode, you will hear from Marcus SÖDER, creative fashion analyst, Julia Krantz, founder of Magic FabricROEI DERHI, fashion designer and founder of Placebo. We talk about how creativity in fashion will change in the wake of artificial intelligence, what consumers are saying about virtual worlds and digitization, and how to run a phygical fashion brand. My name is Konrad Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind. Alright folks, I feel like we're really getting the hang of these sessions now. This is the fourth Virtual Creativity Live we have been hosting in the Lynk Co showroom in Stockholm, and the second to last one. We had some great speakers, our friend Marcus SÖDER, Julia Krantz, ROEI DERHI. People know Julia Krantz as founder of Magic Fabric blog. She has been on the podcast before. Just search for her name and you'll find that episode in the feed. She's really on the forefront of what's happening in the space of digital fashion. Of course, ROEI DERHI also been featured in Scandinavian Mind online and in print. He is the founder of the phygical fashion brand Placebo, and also on the forefront of what's happening. He's really doing it himself. And lastly, we have Marcus SÖDER. Marcus has a long-standing background in the fashion industry as a stylist, creative director. We have been working with him before in that capacity. He is now moved into being somewhat of a market analyst or consumer analyst. He has some great insights of what the consumer is saying on this topic, and it might not be what you expect. Alright, before we get into it, our last session this time around at the Lynk Co showroom with Virtual Creativity Live will happen on May 2nd. So May 2nd, save that date in your calendars and follow our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter not to miss out on that invite. We will go even deeper on AI for this last session. I'm really looking forward to it, and we have a really interesting roster of speakers that I will reveal in the next couple of weeks. All right, here now my conversation with Marcus SÖDER, Julia Krantz and ROEI DERHI at the Virtual Creativity Live in Stockholm. Enjoy. What we wanted to do with this talk is to examine, again, what will happen to creativity with all these new digital tools at our disposal. And we invited you guys to explore this with me. And we have a few different angles we're going to cover. We're both going to live in a kind of physical space. We're going to explore what happens in a digital space. But we're also going to try to figure out what does the consumer really want in this space. I'm going to start with you, Julia. You are the founder of Magic Fabric. You are very active talking about these subjects. I'm going to let you introduce yourself first and the work you do with Magic Fabric. We'll start there.
Yeah, sure. So I started the website Magic Fabric in 2014, so a very long time ago. And the reason I did was because I was looking at a lot at how the game industry was working with 3D software and sort of cloth simulation and how they work with character design, and the potential that would have for the fashion industry and for creatives. And I think back then it wasn't a thing at all. Like, I was reaching out to so many video game companies who wanted to have this conversation. I think none of them understood what I was talking about. And today I think things are very different, clearly. So a lot of things have emerged from these like synergies between new technologies and creativity and fashion and 3D XR AI.
Right. We're going to get into all those concepts. Can you just take the temperature a little bit? Because many of here, when we did this issue 2 years ago, is all about the metaverse and what's going to happen when we all move into these digital worlds. That kind of slowed down. NFTs kind of slowed down. We're going to get to hosting a digital fashion brand soon in a minute. But where are we right now in these topics? What's the temperature out there when you go to conferences, you speak on panels?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to and where you're at. I think in general, and when you sort of read what's on the news, and so we're at the hype curve of AI, and like earlier this year you would hear things like AI is going to kill humanity and so forth, and last year it was like, oh, we're going to live in virtual space now. So I think that's just, but if you talk to people in the industry, they're more pragmatic, clearly, like about, and I think with the fashion industry, they just started implementing 3D technology. They're not even at AI, so I think it's depends on who you talk to, clearly.
And when you talk to the kind of evangelists, the people who are on the forefront, they're really excited about these technology. What are they saying right now?
I think people in general are quite technology positive, and people that are in the industry and see a lot of potential. I think in the game industry, it's a lot of buzz on like people being wiped out due to AI and in concept art and so. And I think when you talk to people in the fashion industry, yes, there's like some comments on designers being reluctant to change and so. But in general, I think people are quite like positive and curious what they can do with this, I'd say.
Interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Marcus, I'm going to move over to you. You have a long background in the fashion industry, working as a stylist. You're now kind of an analyst perspective on the industry. Before we get into just generally, what's your thought on these topics right now? What's the temperature of the industry?
I mean, it's a little bit of Klondike right now. Everyone's searching for gold. No one's found it yet, but everyone knows that it's out there. So people are trying to get there first, but no one knows exactly how to do it. Some are exploring the tools into like, customer service, helping the customers find their size or try things on or whatever it is. And some are maybe generating content with it. Some are creating AI chatbots to help customers. Some are personalizing marketing. So everyone's testing, but no one's found gold yet, I would say.
No one's found gold yet. We'll see. We'll talk more about what gold means. Roy, I'm going to bring you into this. Maybe you're in search for gold. I don't know. You run your own phygital fashion brand, Placebo. Yeah. Maybe you can just start by introducing Placebo and what do you mean by phygital fashion brand?
So Placebo is a phygital fashion brand. That means that we are serving to our customer physical and digital phygital products. They're going to meet us in digital platforms, but at the same time they can meet us digitally.
So expand. I want to understand more about what this is. So you do actually physical fashion shows, for instance, but then you sell the garments or the designs in a digital space. For anyone who doesn't know what a digital fashion product is, a little bit. So
basically, what we see is that there is a need today that people need to wear clothes physically, obviously, as we have until today, but we want to meet them in digital platforms, gaming, metaverse platform. We already talk about the metaverse. We can elaborate later about that if need. But we see actually much more need that the physical clothes will integrate with the digital clothes. And I think that's part of the gold rush that we talk about. How do we do it? We, for example, in Placebo, we have NFC chip in each item that we produce. And then by tapping with your phone, you can actually integrate with augmented reality technology. You can buy it for Zepeto, which is a gaming platform, and then you can have on your avatar the same garment that you bought, just for example.
And you have a background as a kind of a traditional physical fashion designer as well. What made you move into this more digital arena? What excited you about it as a designer?
Craziness. No, but I think as a person, I was always very tech-oriented. I really like to try to teach myself new softwares. I was a gamer, obviously, when I was a small kid, but I think there is something about the digital platform that remind me why I fell in love with fashion. Because fashion is very theatrical, as we remember from the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. And suddenly when you go into digital fashion, there is like another layer of escapism inside. It's like everything that you want to do, there is no limits in anything. You can make clothes float in the air. You can make garments for things that is not even fabrics. And that's, for me, challenging me as a designer in a new way. What is the new fashion design? What is the new way to tell stories? Because fashion is storytelling.
Julia, you're covering this. I think your website is such a resource for creativity in this space, and I so enjoy following it. But with that website, you also it feels like you're onto every new thing that's happening, and you kind of cover it. What do you think people are searching for? Coming off what Roy just said, what is exciting about this more digital approach to producing fashion?
So I guess a lot of the stories I've featured on the site has been also from the perspective of creatives, because I think they have a very unique way of approaching technology that's more like an open, experimental, very not driven by a specific use case or ROI necessarily, but just what can we do with this? And I think really great stuff come out of that wouldn't have happened in a design department. And now I'm talking about creatives that work from with a very artistic approach. But I'm also featuring a lot of new softwares, new tech that people can play with. A lot of it's open to use for everyone. And I guess that's something new to this, that we're putting this in the hands of people that are not necessarily creatively trained and so, to play with them for themselves and just have fun with them. I guess the backside of that is there's going to be a lot of more content in the world, a lot of content on the internet, on social media, and that's also polluting a lot of channels as well.
So you mean a risk of low quality coming out because a lot of amateurs are approaching new technologies? Or
there's for sure an inflation of content out there. Yeah, and I think that can be problematic. Yeah.
Let's talk about it from a kind of consumer's perspective. And Marcus, we talked about it before, how, because I'm certainly guilty of hyping some of these technologies up. If you follow Scandinavian Mind, we love to be on the kind of forefront, and I get very excited about new concepts, you consume a lot of these news, and then it kind of it dials down a little bit, and you come back to the real world and you realize, well, it kind of functions pretty much as it did before. If you look at a macro level, how susceptible are people generally to these new types of experiencing fashion? Do people want it on a broad scale?
No, I would say people are more hesitant than we think, because we think from a very inside-out perspective. We think, what can we do with this? But if we ask the consumers, they are quite skeptical still, because they don't really know how it's going to be used. So for example, if a telecom company announced that we've started using lots of AI now, maybe you would start thinking, what does that mean? Do they listen to my calls? Do they read my texts? What does that actually mean for me as a consumer? And I think there we still see, Forbes did a huge survey recently where they saw that the majority of people are still very reluctant to AI because they don't know what's going to come of it. So I think that gray zone is still there. Obviously now we have a lot of legislation. Just last week, European Parliament passed the Artificial Intelligence Act, which was quite a big step and something that they worked on for years. And that meant also securing safety, but still not hindering innovation. So there is this tug of war thing. But then you have, connecting back to what you say, how the digital space is so important. I think for a young generation, they're more interested in their online presence than their physical presence. And that we started to see, the shift, maybe it just started on social media and whatever, the spaces that you're in that are digital. But I think moving forward, we're going to continue seeing more of this, because the digital space is more controllable. You can decide what you wear, how you look, how you act, and so on, while the physical, you have to work with what you've got. And I think that will appeal to a lot of people to be something that they're not. So there's still that inner human drive to maybe, change yourself or be someone else. And that's going to affect the fact that since we spend so much time online, if you can control or dress or whatever, that's going to enable.
Let's stick on this definition for a while, and I want to hear from all of you, because we are moving into territory where we're talking about what is fashion really. We talk about content, it becomes digital content. Is a video of something really fashion? Where does the line blur? And maybe you can start reflecting, Marcus, will the traditional garment producing fashion industry be part of this change? Do you see them play a role? If you can just envision a little bit.
No, I think that a lot of traditional companies are struggling to understand how to approach these new worlds, because they have very old school business models of, for example, selling clothes. And I think the practical aspect of clothes we will always need, but the idea of fashion is much more to express identity, which is the key thing. So if your identity is more important, for example, online, then that's where you're going to put your effort. But I see a lot of the fashion players are going to struggle on how to take this on, especially because a lot of them think that maybe it's a marketing opportunity when it's not. It's just like the new consumer will have a mindset that is so different that they won't be appealed by a very old school business model.
There's a room for disruption there. Julia, how do you define fashion in this context?
Oh, wow. I mean, fashion shares a lot of the same sort of challenges that other industries are struggling with as well. For example, sustainability, but also what to do with retail in the future, like in brick and mortar, what happens to that? And I think during the pandemic, something that sort of rose from that was the importance of reaching people in their homes and like where they're at. And I think that their digital realities can play a very important role. And I think it's like most brands dream to have this like super tight relationship with the consumer, whether that's like super experiential with digital worlds and whatever skins and so, or if it's like super sleek, just being out of the way, giving you the right size or whatever you're doing. That could also be a way of building that relationship. But I think that the pandemic was sort of, then we saw that drive very clearly how important that was.
Roy, from your perspective, you're running a fashion brand. You're saying it's phygital, it's both physical and digital garments. To play a little bit of devil's advocate, what makes the digital thing fashion for you?
Obviously, because I'm coming from fashion, so there is always a need to have like a fashionable layer on top of that. And that brings us to the question of what is fashion. And I think for me, fashion is kind of a shapeshifter, I would say, because fashion is always changing according to the values, to the culture, to political things. I mean, but it's always somehow connect, and that's very connected to you, to identity. Because even back then in the days, people put clothes on themselves. It's show my relation to the tribe, it show my relation to the culture, to my economic state, where I am in the culture. And I think now we are in a phase when self-expression is so important. And I find that people, especially young people, having a lot of time with their avatar and their characters because they feel it's part of their identity. And there is no obligation in that, because in a just press on a button I can change who I am, even not human. And that's part of the escapism that we talked about. It's maybe part even of the dopamine that make them want to come back to that. But I think fashion for us today is a fantasy. It was always a fantasy, and now we're just taking to a different level.
I like that. Talk about how you are perceived as a designer. I'm curious because I mean you're fairly new on the arena with your brand, but I also know you're collaborating with design museums, and you have and you do these kind of physical fashion shows, but you're also very much in the digital space. I feel like you have new types of arenas which you interact with. How do you feel you are perceived as a designer within these spaces, and do they differ depending on? If you know, a museum sounds like a very traditional space, for instance.
First of all, I have to say that actually I was really lucky because I got a really strong team next to me of people that understand numbers, which I have no idea as a designer, and business, which I know because I was in H&M and it's a great school for business of fashion. But I have to say that in that phase, we are very experimental. We try different things because we are in a blue ocean. Blue ocean, it's like the field is quite empty. There is not a lot of players. And to understand, you're just doing experience on people, what they want to interact with. So we try different things. When it comes to augmented reality, when it comes to skins, when it comes to NFT, we mentioned then blockchain. And to connect to what you ask, actually, for me, the challenge now is actually to bring, when it comes to the blue ocean, to bring it to be more easy for people to understand what it's digital fashion and how we can utilize that. Because if you cannot utilize that, it's a little bit problematic, because fashion you need to be wear in some way. It need to interact with the body. It need to have utilization. And if it doesn't have utilization, then we have a lot of question marks around that, I would say. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just fascinated by your answer. So let's stick on that. Julia, do you agree? Does fashion have to have that utilization, or it can just be an experience like a piece of art or a design?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, fashion has traditionally always been defined with something you wear on the body, and now we've gone beyond that definition for sure. But maybe that isn't the most interesting question we can ask ourselves. Like, how do we define it and what it is, and rather where do we want to go? Like, what do we? I feel like there's a lack of visions and utopias right now in society, and I feel like the fashion industry almost has a gun against its head. Like, now you have to become sustainable as well.
Yeah.
So. I feel like sometimes we should talk more about how we want the world to be rather than what's wrong with it in a way.
I'm super curious then. What do you see that is visionary? What do you like out there? What are there players, designers, creatives, brands that are actually providing a vision? Do you think?
I think we have several of them in the audience today. I think there's some really cool people here today that are working with innovation in footwear and fashion and AI. So make sure you mingle afterwards. But I guess the biggest leaps are maybe not going to come from the bigger corporations because they're so tight back with they have a big ship to turn. So I'm really looking at the smaller ventures and people that can move faster. And I guess one of the things that is interesting to watch is how AI can be an enabler in how we design, how we can design in a more collaborative way, in more collective ways. And we have this super traditional sort of way of thinking of designers as this auteurs, Ingmar Bergman's, it's one person's vision. And I think that could definitely be challenged in the future.
I want to end on design and AI, and so. But Marcus, I'm super curious to hear your take on this. Do we lack a vision? Is fashion?
Yes, I think we lack a bit of a vision, but I'm hoping that AI might be the enabler, and tech in general, not just AI, might be the enabler to separate the sort of the visionaries that have the ability to dream and really think big, because all of a sudden that blue ocean is hopefully for them and you and a lot of players out there to start dreaming again and saying now I don't have these boundaries, this little box of having to buy a fabric and knowing how to sew. I just have to have dreams and visions. And I'm really hoping that we'll see that sort of differentiation. And of course there's going to be some brands that are going to stick around and do really good clothes. They're not going to break into that and they're not going to benefit from that in the long run, but they'll stick around. But I'm really hoping that we'll get to see some of this, but there's a long way to go. I mean, AI Fashion Week was in New York, this first iteration of it, and get this, it was physical only. So I accepted an invite and then realized I had to be there in New York to attend it, and I was so shocked that I couldn't log in and join it. And I just thought, how can they do this? How have they not thought this through, that people from all over the world can join this? They're physically in a space on Broadway. So there's still a bit of a way to go, but it's interesting to see. For example, a brand took 3 of the winners from this competition from AI Fashion Week and actually physically produced the clothes. And they're for sale now. So I think it's interesting to see where you start from that sort of dream, where someone designs with just the free vision, and then a brand will go in and say, this is super interesting, let's put this into production and see what we can do with it. And there, in that connection, there's something interesting that's going to come of it, I think.
Well, that's a great segue, because we have to talk about generative AI and everything that's been happening the past year with ChatGPT and DALL-E and all Midjourney and all these tools. Now we have Sora. We did a session last month, it's out on our podcast now, about how this affected photography. So we really dived into it there. But it bears similarities. So I'm curious, maybe start with you, the designer. Are you using AI at all, generative AI, in your development of your garments or digital garments?
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do you do it? Take us behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think we need to divide it, because there is two kind of AI. We have the productive AI, which collect much more data, and I think buyers and more business oriented, where they need to get data and get kind of input about that, that's one part. But the generative AI is well for creating content. And for me, it's kind of a good start point to have a dialogue with someone, because as I'm quite an owl as well. I like to stay until late and sketching and those kind of things. Crazy, I told in the beginning. But there is a way now to have a dialogue with someone that works with you, which is the computer, and send him a sketch, and then I will get back the sketch maybe in a different way, and then send it back in a collage, and just have a very creative dialogue around it, and then have the outcome that I want and take it from there. There is a gap of which kind of picture I'm getting, and we need to remember that fashion is 3D. I need to know how to create a pattern. AI today doesn't know necessarily how to give me the pattern, and sometimes it's not necessarily able to create that. So it challenged me as a designer, okay, how am I actually creating that? But definitely I think it's a good start point for inspiration, and it's a great tool.
So it's more like it's like a sparring partner. You test ideas.
It's a good partner.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Julia, have you seen any great AI generated fashion lately?
For sure. I guess what I'm interested in, I haven't seen a lot of this because it's still sort of expensive and clunky to build your own data sets, but I think just brands, the opportunity for brands to have their brand living in AI rather than people or a creative director, and just like, it would make it so much easier to scale. For example, when you work with an agency and the agency is going to do like 5 banners, instead of giving them a graphic profile, having AI helping them guide that. I think that's a big opportunity. Or just have building on top of your own style, having the AI suggesting new things, especially for example, for agencies working with clients. I think that's a perfect use case.
Marcus, what do you see? What use do we have of AI for fashion brands right now? I mean, there's a certain scale in just imagery and stuff coming out of fashion brands. Can AI play a role there, do you think?
I think so, but I think, as you mentioned before, the quality of it is still super important, and right now the quality is not there yet. So, I mean, before we're going to start replacing traditionally created content with AI-generated content, I think it needs to get better,
right,
and probably needs to become a little bit more controllable and so on. I mean, on a text level, I think that it's super good. Me as an analyst can work a lot with it in that respect, so that's really positive. But in terms of content creation, I don't think it's there yet. But considering the pace it's moving, I'm pretty sure it's going to get there quite soon. I mean, I saw something on your blog about Alibaba's tech research team testing out e-com images, making them moving. That was jaw-dropping. So, I mean, if these things keep on happening in this pace, then I think a lot of things are gonna happen and change things. But I think on the text part level, there things can happen. For example, the guiding of customers, like finding your size, understanding how it fits, chatbot, talking like what is the color of this and so on. There, I think there's a huge potential, and I mean, Zalando's really deeply invested into this, so I think a lot of them will benefit if they find the gold.
And lastly, we can go on forever. I feel like we need to bring the conversation out to the crowd as well afterwards. But lastly, just all three of you, what are you most excited about now in this space? And starting with you, Roe. Your brand is based here in Stockholm. What's the next step? What are you looking at doing?
Do we have to start with me? I need to think about it.
But this was a tricky one.
I think, to be honest, I think every day is exciting. I mean, I'm going every morning to LinkedIn, I'm going to social media, I see which kind of software, new AI things, new extended reality technologies, and my mind is just like starting to work. Okay, what can I do with that? How can I use it as a creative tool? How can I model something and then use VFX, CGI, all these kind of new technologies that we still not so new, but how can we implement more, and how can we create more fashionable things? As connect to what I said before, how can I utilize in those kind of technologies digital fashion more, or phygical fashion more? So I think, I mean, it's a very techy answer, but every day it's like a journey.
And you're also raising money, right?
And yes,
I felt like it built up, so you wanted to plug that
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me. But we are in the first round of Placebo. Yes, so we are. It's very exciting time for us, and cross fingers for us.
Good stuff. We look forward to following that. Marcus, how about you?
I'm excited about the fact that the level for us amateurs that aren't so technologically advanced is lowering all the time to this fact that I can ask, what am I doing wrong, and get an answer. So that was like when that barrier that takes away the gatekeeping, so to speak. So I look forward to seeing that part where me as an amateur more can explore it and then understand how I can work with it. So that explorational phase, like you talked about, the blue ocean. I like the idea that everyone gets that opportunity. It's not gate kept anymore, and that I look forward to seeing someone just say like, "Oh, I did this video and it was just for fun." That I think is going to start changing things, because the people with a lot of imagination is also going to start creating really interesting things.
Good, Julia. Last words.
Yeah, I think the next decade is going to be actually great for creativity. I think what's happening right now is really putting the finger on what's like good creative work is, because I mean everyone's putting out like mid-journey images with their LinkedIn articles and so, but it's quite clear to most people that they're not great images. But I don't think that the person that made it understands that. So there's like, so what is that skill like? And that's like, I think that puts the finger on something, and I think we have a way, like, because we're so influenced by how we view technology, and technology is really like dictating so much, and we also have a very like engineering way of looking at this as well. And I mean, fashion is a part of culture. It's a part of pop culture. It's also responding to pop culture. So there's no like engineering this like and seeing and scraping and seeing what consumers are going to buy.
No.
What worked last time might not work next year. And I've seen so many. Have this conversation with so many people that are trying to build like AIs that can respond to trends, and then suddenly you can produce something tomorrow. And I don't think that's the right direction where we want to take this. We can use it for other things.
Yeah, I fully agree.
The next decade will be great for creativity. I'll take that as the parting words. Marcus SÖDER, JULIA KRANTZ, and ROEI DERHI, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Round of applause. You've been listening to the Scandinavian Mind podcast with me, Konrad Olsson. Don't miss the next Virtual Creativity Live happening at the Lynk Co showroom in Stockholm on May 2nd. Sign up to our newsletter not to miss out on that invite. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. Till next week, bye.